Hey everyone! Thank you so much for joining us. It is Get the Word Out, and it's me, Sarah Blessing, and we are talking all about saving public education. Public education has been attacked by our state government in Indiana for the last 20 years, and it is getting to the point where there's so much damage, schools are going to be closed. And this is not a partisan issue. This is not a Democrat versus Republican issue. This is a 90% of Hoosier students attend public, and we all need to work together and protect our children so that they are going to quality public education schools. So I've got with me today a really fantastic guest host, and her name is Cathy Fuentes Rowan, which is a pretty cool name. And she is the president of the Indiana Coalition for Public Education. And we are going to just have an open discussion about why we should be protecting public education in Indiana and how you can help, which we have to have you on board if we're going to save our schools. Cathy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And you have been involved in this organization for a long time. Can you give us a little bit of background about how you got started and why you're doing this work?
Sure. So I am a mom of 4 kids who have now, at this point, all graduated from public schools down here in Monroe County. But I got started when my youngest was actually still in preschool, about to go into kindergarten, when the state, under then Mitch Daniels as our governor and Tony Bennett as our state superintendent, which we can no longer elect, by the way, when Mitch Daniels cut $300 million out of the budget for public schools. And
Wow.
that was 2009, and it was an effect that had to go immediately. Schools had to make up for that loss of funding. And so in our local community, it was something like 74 teachers that were riffed, that were laid off, and programming lost. And so our community got together. I and a bunch of moms were talking about it, and we decided to put a referendum on the ballot in the fall so we could bring back those positions and those programs for our kids. So I got involved at that time just to try to help with that effort, and I helped with the canvassing that went on. It was a very, people from all walks of life felt under attack because our public schools are basically the heart of our communities. And so we all worked together and we passed a referendum pretty overwhelmingly. We're able to do that and have continued to pass it again as it has expired, and added actually another one. But it was the shot across the bow that this was happening. And immediately following those cuts in 2011, the state legislature passed this slate of legislation about education that was primarily, the centerpiece was vouchers that got started in 2011,
Mm-hmm.
where the funding started going from our public education pot of money to private mostly religious schools. And they expanded charters, and they also started this test-driven accountability, which was like high stakes testing became. And this was a national effort. Indiana was not unique in this. And teacher unions had already been attacked at that point as a right to work state. So a lot of things converged at the same time. And so at the state level, Indiana Coalition for Public Education was formed by retired educators or people who were aware, like our former state superintendents, of what vouchers would mean for education in ways that moms like myself, we were running carpool and taking care of kids and doing that juggle. Or if it wasn't a mom that had the means that I was in, the parents are working multiple jobs. Nobody knows what state policy is happening for their schools until it really hurts them. And so I found out about the Indiana Coalition for Public Education, and there was a movie called Rise Above the Mark that got started. It was West Lafayette School Corporation and their superintendent, Rocky Killian, I think it was the foundation that started it, to really show people what was happening. I think it was like maybe the next 2 years. And we got activated down here in Monroe County and started our own chapter of the Indiana Coalition for Public Education, of which I was the president. And so I guess the political is the personal, or the personal is political. And so when you feel this, when you see it happening up close and personal, that's when you become really aware.
Yeah, so I just want to break down these issues so that people that don't follow politics as closely as some of us do can understand, because this is hurting children that attend public schools. And I think there's a lot of kind of lies out there about charter and private schools that we just need to be aware of. And it's
Right.
so interesting because I taught at a Catholic school for 18 years, mostly 5th grade. And I was a teacher during the whole movement when vouchers got
Mm,
started.
yeah,
And I was told through our group of Catholic administrators how great the voucher program was. And
sure.
I was never told that it was hurting public schools.
Hmm.
I would have not supported it had I known the truth. But I was in my little Catholic school bubble, and I was just told the money follows the kid. If the kid's
Hmm.
not going to public school, then they should get the money of what school it does come to. And I was also told it was going to allow all of these kids that couldn't afford the Catholic tuition to get to come. Well, sometimes we got a few of those, but the majority of the students at the Catholic school that used the vouchers, their parents could have paid the tuition, and they were paying the tuition, but they were very happy to fill out a couple quick, easy forms and have our tax dollars pay for it, not realizing it is stripping money from the public schools and students that cannot attend private or
Right.
charter or religious schools. Like, not everybody's parents can drive their kids to school. Our schools in New Albany, you had to be dropped off at and picked up, and that a lot of people can't do that. Another thing that we need to realize is there aren't great charter private religious schools available in rural areas. So, what county are you in, Kathy?
I'm in Monroe County. I'm where Indiana University is. So we are
Nice.
very fortunate. Yeah. A
So
college.
I'm in Harrison County, and
Mhm.
there are not any good charter Catholic religious private schools in our county. There are some small, not great ones, and there are some online schools, which my son did during the pandemic one year, and it was terrible. It's
Oh,
not
yeah.
anything like going in person. So the it really affects rural. If you are living in a rural area and you're not in a big city like Indy, or you're not in New Albany, you're not in Monroe, if you are in rural areas, they legit want to turn your public schools into charter ones that won't be as good. And we have to fight to stop them. I mean, that's sort of what they're doing now, is just they're trying to close down schools. And we won't talk about all the nitty gritty laws, but we just need to be aware their plan is get rid of government funded education and make it all private charter religious. I mean, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think it's a very confusing and very complicated issue that is really hard to break down. But a lot of even our legislators don't really know the difference between a charter school and a voucher school. Like, so the voucher program is but 90% of what that student would get if they were going to a public school, the per pupil amount. We get funded by the state. I think the school funding is really confusing. Used to be that you got funded by your local property taxes, but they changed that right before the cuts to public education. They changed it to be state funded. So we hold our hands out and get the funding from the state, the
Huh.
per pupil amount. And that's when they talk about the backpack full of cash. We get a per pupil amount, and it varies in each school district. And there's a complexity. They try to get complexity formula, recognizing that kids that are living in poverty, or kids with special needs, or kids who are learning English, all cost more to educate because the needs are greater. And so, but anyway, so that's like on that side. Then we also have property taxes for public schools, and that goes to your debt service, and it goes to your transportation, and it goes to your capital projects, so that like we can renovate a school or those kinds of things, make sure our buildings aren't falling down. But when they capped property taxes in the Constitution, a lot of communities cannot raise their funding enough to really get. That's the problem that we're having.
Is that the state constitution or the national
It is
constitution?
the state constitution that people passed, they voted for. And so it's that kind of anti-tax movement. But taxes are what gives us roads. Taxes are what provides education for all. And taxes give us police and fire and all, the things that public service, the public good. And anyway, so, you already had this public school system that was underfunded because of those cuts. But then you had this voucher system where the funding is following the child supposedly to the private religious schools. And it was sold to the legislators and to the public, basically, that this was just sort of an urban problem, that those kids were going to failing public schools in like Indianapolis or Gary, and definitely is racialized, and that they deserve to be able to go to a private school as well. And the assumption being that the private school was better than the public school. And it's certainly true that the defunding and the stressors on our public schools in many urban areas has made it hard. But though there's no proof that that is a better school system over there. There's a lot of research that shows that they are not.
I want to talk about that because I have my own experiences. So I taught at many public schools when I attended IUS, and they were great, and I learned a ton. But then I got hired at a Catholic school. So all of my 18 years were at this one Catholic school. And I was always told by the administrators, by the whole group, that our school system was better than all the public schools around us. And I just kind of blindly believe what they're telling me, So I have a child, he's 15 now, and I bring him to my schools. And he attends preschool for 2 years, kindergarten first, second grade. And then in third grade, I had moved to Palmyra, gotten remarried, and had twins. And I took half a year off from that school, and I used all of my sick days. So I decided to send Micah to third grade at the local public school, Morgan Elementary, where my twins are at now for kindergarten. And that is when, throughout that whole year of Micah attending third grade at Morgan Elementary, that's where I realized Morgan's better than my school. And it was humbling. I was like, oh, you did that thing? Oh, you have that extra stuff? Oh, your teachers get that type of professional development? Look at all these things you're doing. And it was just so humbling for me to realize, well, Morgan's better than my school. And I'm like, that kind of woke me up. Well, what else am I being told that's not true? And I think it's a money thing. A lot of the parents that send their kids to these Catholic schools have more money than maybe the average people that send them to an average type of public school. And it's just the assumption that since these people make more money, that it's better. But that's not true. And also, when I was a teacher at this Catholic school, I got very little professional development. I really reached out and sought it out myself. Whenever I could do one, I did. But we did not get as much training as the public school teachers did. We did have more freedom, Cathy. I would be able to pick my books. I just had to teach the standards. How I taught the standards was up to me, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to teach at the Catholic school. But just my kid got a better education, in my opinion, as a teacher with a master's. So that was pretty eye-opening, mind blowing, I guess, for me.
Well, I think that's something that's, first of all, a lot of people, when you say a school is a bad school, it's usually code for a school that has a lot of kids that are dealing with the effects of poverty in it. And often children of color. So to base what a bad school or good school is on based on a test score is something that the test-driven accountability has encouraged people to believe that makes it a better school. And we all know, as you know, as a mother, and I know as a mother, and we should citizens, that we want so much more for our kids than for them to be able to take a test well. I mean, we want our kids to be able to think deeply. We want them to have so many opportunities to go deep, to have not just an inch level and a mile wide of knowledge, but to actually have deep knowledge. And we want them to be critical thinkers. And you cannot test critical thinking on a standardized test. And so people made these assumptions about what is a good school and what is a bad school. But going back to the private religious school, because this was sold as a way to help children in poverty, and in particular kids in the urban city, the legislators said, you don't need to really worry pretty little heads about this because it's not going to come to you. It's not going to be a problem for you. We're just going to help some kids get private tuition, get part of it paid for. Because some of those schools, the voucher does not cover the full thing of tuition. And you're right. It's usually people who have the privilege or have the means who can provide their kids a transportation, who are out there looking for a choice. And, usually it's a religious reason that people do private school, but there are other reasons as well. The fact is, though, is that when they created this program, they made it so that those kids have to take a test, but they don't have the same consequences for if they take the test in the Catholic school or in the private school. And they don't have to test. They don't have to adhere to. We don't know where the money is going. They don't have to take the same kids. They can legally discriminate against children.
Yes. So in my school, we could say no if a kid had too many, like if the special needs were too hard for our school to accommodate, we just say no.
Right.
So we're giving money to schools that can say no. And they're saying no to kids with special needs. They're saying no to kids that might be a different race. They're saying no to kids who might have two moms or two dads, or a single mom or a single dad. If they don't like your religious background, like if you're a different religion than whatever that school is, they can say no. And we're not talking about that. We're just saying how great it is, how wonderful it is that you can choose your school. But the thing is, the school gets to choose the kid.
That's exactly right. Schools choose, not the families. And when you send your kid over there, you are saying goodbye to your child's rights to a free and appropriate, the special needs rights. If you go over to that public school, they don't have the same requirements for teachers, teacher licensure. And so, while I think that they are not legally allowed to discriminate against race so far anyway, but they are able to discriminate against ability because they can't provide it, and they're a private school. So they can say, they don't like your lifestyle.
Right. So it's not like they can say it's race, but they can zoom into your life and pick another reason.
Yeah. They're able to do that. And there are no guardrails on that funding that are going over to vouchers. And we're now, we've spent toward privatization alone since 2011, something like $5 billion towards that. And it has helped these schools. But we have a board member on our ICPE board who's been delving into the tuition and this reason that, this will help you pay. And what he's looked at is how much tuition is compared to the voucher over time. And it looks like, and we know this from national studies, that a lot of these schools, once they saw that they could get vouchers, and that got expanded where you didn't have to be poor, you didn't have to try to the public school first and then come over, this was the nose under the tent, and all the rest of the camel came. And it's very much clear this session that they were saying they wanted everyone to, universal vouchers. Didn't matter what you made.
Yeah. So it started, you didn't have to have, like you had a lower income families could get vouchers. But
Mhm.
now it's like $250,000 on average or something, that
Yeah.
you can make $250,000 or less and get a voucher for your kid to attend these schools, and then that rips the money from the public education, and they're changing it to you can make whatever you want.
Right.
And we know with the data, the majority of people using these vouchers could be paying for their kids to go to these schools. So it's just a way to get upper middle class, wealthy people free private education. And
Yeah.
for, yeah, and it's
And, yeah, I forgot what I was gonna say, but yeah, you're exactly right. But right now, the average child that takes the voucher, the family that takes the voucher, is a family that's much more suburban than urban than it had
Mhm.
been, and I think is white, um, and so the whole idea of it being like rescuing children of color from inner city schools was a sales pitch, and now it's just about freedom. And for a while they were trying to say, like, because these schools are better and those schools are better, but when they started doing test driven accountability, they started seeing that actually the public schools were doing great, even still,
Yeah,
even without choosing
even with being
which
defunded the last
kid
20 years, the public
they
schools are
those
still doing a good job.
they are
Yeah.
still rising to the occasion to meet those children where they are, not turn them away if they aren't going to be able to be an easy kid to educate, and still do those things.
And I
Then
want to
I
talk.
think the charter school, I was just going to switch to that because
Yeah,
people get confused about charters.
sure.
The charter school is is a public school under the law. It is publicly funded, so it's free to the parents, but it is privately run. So they are not under the purview of elected board. And so charter schools are something that I think is also a form of privatization because it's, again, it's it's replicating, the school whole, how many systems of education do we need is really my point. Like, and the Constitution guarantees our kids a right to, a common school system, a uniform common school system. We're so far from that right now with all these different choices all over the place, and no regulation over that funding
Mm-mm,
or the decision making
mm-mm.
and that kind of thing. So charters have more of the same requirements that public schools do, but they do have that kind of leeway of the private. Is very hard to find many charter schools board meetings. They don't meet every month. They don't show the money is not
You
as
to like clearly see
defined.
what charter schools are doing, where the money's going, are the
Right,
kids getting well educated? All that data is not there. We have the data for the public. Surprisingly, public schools are still doing pretty well considering how hard our state government has been hurting them. But
right.
we have nothing on charter schools. During the pandemic, Micah, my 15-year-old, attended Connections Academy, a virtual charter school during fifth grade. That was the year I quit teaching and I taught fifth grade. So it's during the pandemic. I'm watching my twins that are 2 helping
Mm,
my
mm,
child with fifth grade virtual, thinking I'd be able to do it since I'm a fifth grade teacher. And it was a pretty terrible year. We were sort of traumatized with the pandemic. So that was one problem. I won't, that's not Connections' fault. But then online school for a year for my kid that loves to be around kids his age was really mentally harmful for him. He needed to be around other kids. He very rarely got to even speak or look at other children on that Connections Academy. So here's this, I didn't pay one dime for that. I got to
mhm.
sign up for it. My tax dollars went towards it. And then we talked to the teacher some, but the lessons were boring. My kid didn't soak up much of it. It's extremely easy to cheat. These kids that are doing online school, it's so easy to cheat on any of the tests or anything. I'm not saying my kid did. My kid's really good with academics, but he just put it on a test and then just lost it. I mean, it took him a couple years going to going to public education to get him caught up, and now he's doing great. But I do not recommend virtual school. unless your kid, I think sometimes it might be a good fit if there's like just so much bullying or something and your kid just has so much anxiety or whatever. I'm sure there are certain instances, but I would say for the majority, I do not recommend an online charter school that you can't even compare to going to school with other kids, being in person with those teachers that care about them.
Yeah. Well, we know in educational research that online school is pretty abysmal in general, and certainly there are circumstances where some kids need to be doing it. Though some kids are ill, there are all kinds of
Hmm.
circumstances. But
Right.
um, but we're still looking at the virtual charter school scandal that happened here in Indiana several years ago, and still waiting to see where that $140 million or whatever it was, the tens of millions of dollars that of our public tax dollars that went into these guys' coffers and never came back.
Yeah, we need to talk about that for a second. So, why why is our government pushing charter schools so hard? Because a few people are making a lot of money from them. It's very, very profitable to get taxpayer dollars for something, to get government funding. And there are so many loopholes in our state laws for charters, that you can start a very bad charter school, drop out halfway through the year, and keep the money that you took from the government. And so we have evidence of this happening, like you're saying. But it's really easy to track. OpenSecrets.org. I used that website when I was running
Mhm.
for state house, and it's pretty upsetting. Don't do it if you're having a bad day, because our government elected officials, sometimes on both sides, but they take very little money from some type of charter school group, somebody that's profiting on it. They give some money and they say, "Hey, vote for charter schools." And they're like, "You got it." And it's really upsetting to me. It's like sometimes it's just like $1,000 donated to your campaign, and then they're passing legislation to give tons of money to charter schools. So,
Yeah, we have a board member who, Gail Cosby, that sits on the IPS school board, who talked about when she ran the very first time, she was supported by a lot of pro-charter, pro-school choice organizations that gave her a lot of funding. And she was naive and less informed and didn't really understand the whole climate or environment of education reform and what that meant. And so this time around, she refused to take any of that funding. But it is true that there's a lot of money going to political campaigns. And look, I think it's really important to recognize that this has been a bipartisan attack on public education.
yes.
Very neoliberal idea to have charter schools to try and make more products, that somehow this product, this competition will create a better product, and then everybody will get better. But I think that it's really important to recognize that a competition involves winners and losers, and that no 6-year-old should be on the losing end of equal educational opportunity.
We're hurting our kids that are rural, and we're hurting our kids that are most vulnerable, that cannot afford to be driven to a school, or that parents can't stay home while their kids do virtual.
Right.
We're hurting everyday hardworking Hoosier parents and their children, and that's where I get the most upset, because we don't talk about them enough. We just blindly act like we're helping everybody by doing this. And I want to talk just a minute about what it was like for me when I student taught 6th grade at Grantline Elementary. It's a public school. This was in 2002, I think. And I taught 6th grade, and it was fantastic. The principal was wonderful. The teachers were fantastic. I learned so much. There were tons of special needs kids in my classes. I taught 3 6th grade classes, and they all had all these aides and these people trained, and they would pull the kids out, bring them in, give me stuff to help with them. And they were special needs, all kind, across the board, some in wheelchairs, some with trouble, like they didn't have a high IQ, and just all kinds of different issues. And since then, I've just seen the stripping away of special needs education. Take an aid away here, take some money, take a funded program, and now it's not the same. The teachers are doing the best they can. they're still helping kids. They teach everybody, but the resources, the money, the extra support is not near what it was. We can very quickly get that back if we start funding public education properly again. It won't take that long. We did it the first time. We kept adding money to special education back when I first started, and it was wonderful. And it just, I can see the hurt. And I
Yep.
hate when the people taking the money from us, they're taking the money from the schools, and then they're saying it's the school's fault they're not doing as well. And it's like, no, it's your fault. You're taking away the stuff we need to teach the children. And I just get tired of that constant argument that's so false.
Yeah, I mean, you have that unique perspective to be able to see this whole trajectory from before. Like, we are not yet at the pre-2009-10. We're not even at that level of funding for public schools anymore. Because now, if you think about it, we are funding that funding for education. We have a graphic on our website on Indiana Coalition for Public Ed.org that is a leaky bucket. And so it started off with just a couple holes drilled in there, and now it's gushing from all different sides. Now we have things called education scholarship accounts, which is just like a blank check to parents for some kind of educational services if their kid has special needs, or now it's the siblings, and they're trying to expand all these different ways that the funding is running out of the bucket. And you know, when it was sold to us about vouchers, they said, well, that child won't be educated in your school anymore, so it's saving you money, because the kid was leaving the public school at that time. But now we are funding kids who have never had any intention of being in the public school, and who are already in the private school, and parents who can already afford that. And so that funding is limited. And so the kids that are special needs that are not allowed to go to those schools are losing out on the things you're talking about, paras and so forth. And, we can't talk about this climate without also talking about the way that teachers have been and educators have been jerked around over the last 20 years or so. Like, here's your bar. Now you need to reach it. Nope, sorry, it's over here. This is your bar you have to reach. Whoops, sorry, it's over here.
And then there's no extra money when we change the laws and add
Right.
extra requirements. We don't give you money for that. You figure it out. They do
And
that a lot too.
my youngest, who's now a sophomore in college, was the first one to graduate from high school, the first generation of them that were in these pathways that they had just created. And now there's a whole new diploma that we've come up with. And it is a lot like tracking, taking a child and deciding what career they're going to be in. This is part of why the United States has been a really great country, was that we had education for all. Like, we started and decided that just because you were from a low-income family or, a working class family, you didn't necessarily have to stay in that place, that you could get an education that might give you a shot. This is a promise that was never fully fulfilled. We've never fully funded special ed. We have done a lot of tracking. There's so much replication of social inequality in our schools. People who are supporting public schools are not saying that they're perfect. That's very, very clear. We're not saying that the private schools are terrible and that the charter schools, there are some great schools all around. What we're saying is, like, where is the tipping point and what is your social responsibility? Because it's not a consumer thing. These are not factories that these children go to, no matter how many times the legislators are wanting to tell us that. Because
And they want to make programs too for the high school kids where they can leave high school early or leave part of the day and go and actually work in a legit factory. It's
well,
just
that's
like
exactly
child
true.
labor.
And this is all the labor laws getting rolled back
It's like,
because now we don't have enough people to work in the jobs that are low income jobs that they want. And
so
so
let's get kids involved. Let's get teenagers in there. Yeah, it's like,
it makes it
where's the humanity and the
right.
empathy
Well,
and the love for everybody?
it makes it incumbent upon our school boards to say, we are still going to provide that equal educational opportunity as much as we possibly can, that depth and that breadth of curriculum for kids. So we educate the whole child instead of plugging them into some kind of thing where they're going to end up dropping out of high school,
Oh yeah. And
And
my
so,
kid, my
yeah.
kid's in ninth grade and he got that tracking thing. And I didn't even have like much choice. It was just like, I mean, I think we could have, but sort of the kid can do it on their own. And thankfully, my kid's highly motivated. So he picked like the highest one. I'm like, oh,
Right.
you sure you want that one? It looks hard. He's like, yeah, not every kid's that motivated in ninth grade. So the tracking thing I have seen, and you're right, that is alarming. I don't think many people realize that all of the money the counties lose in rural areas, because a lot of this money gets pumped into Indianapolis
Right.
or big cities. Like Monroe's getting more money, probably New Albany's getting some more, Floyd County, but in Harrison County, we have lost a ton of money that was supposed to go to North Harrison schools, Cordon schools, South Central schools, and instead they went to fund Indianapolis charter private religious schools. I don't think most people
Yeah.
even realize that.
I think that that's a really important talking point that we're trying to get out there as public education advocates of this is coming at a cost to your local community. Why are they willing to let tiny little charter schools open up? These charter schools individually are considered a whole school system of themselves under the parts of the law. And so why are they allowing these very tiny charter schools to stay open and pouring more funding in there? By the way, we get a lot of funding from the federal government that goes into these charter schools, millions of dollars only for charter schools. It's a stream that public schools, traditional public schools, do not get. And we're pouring all this, and at the same time, we're slipping into bills the disillusion of whole school systems that we say are too small, with no democracy, no conversation. And, I think I wanted to go back to that point with charter schools and voucher schools. When you are unhappy with the direction that your public school is going, it matters a lot about leadership. The people who hire the superintendent are the elected people that we have in our community that we elect to our school board. They don't run the schools, but they do determine the direction in which the school is going. So if there is a failure in your public school system to fulfill the promise of public schools for your community, you can change that board and elect people who are going to really focus on that, make sure that their superintendent and their principals are directly focused on the kids that slip through the cracks, or math is not working in your district, or whatever it is. We have a voice as parents and as community members and as taxpayers in the running of our schools because we elect these board members. They do their business in public. That is legal. They cannot do stuff behind closed doors. They show us where their decisions are, and every single dollar is accounted for. But in a charter school, you cannot elect it. You cannot elect that board. They are self-appointed. They don't even have to live in state. And so you don't have that same voice in your school system. And then
you can't go to the meetings. So if your
well,
kid
you're
attends a
supposed to
charter
be
school,
able to. Yeah, but what I was going to say is that
you can go to the meeting. Sorry, I missed that. You
yeah,
are.
they're public. You're supposed to be able to, but good luck trying to find where some of these meetings are occurring and
Oh,
when.
okay.
Like
Thanks.
we have had volunteers that can go that try to get to those charter school meetings. Sometimes they only meet 4 times a year. So it isn't, or one board is supposedly going for multiple charters, I think. But it's a very convoluted thing. But the point of that is, in Marion County, 1 in 3 of those schools, charter schools, have closed down.
Wow.
And that's what they say is accountability for charter schools. They say, well, we are accountable. We're more accountable because if it's not working, whatever that is, usually not getting enough funding or people in there, their results are abysmal, attendance, then we close down. But closing a school is not really accountability, it's trauma. Those kids, that's their home away from home. That is where they go to learn. That is, we trust the school to take care of those kids. It's traumatic for the community. It's traumatic for the children. And then they get dispersed. And when I first became a public education advocate and I started attending different things to learn more as a mom, I went to something that was at the university that was a person from one of these pro-school choice, like charter organizations in Ohio. And he was coming to tell us a brown bag lunch for mostly people who were interested in public ed policy. But he was coming to talk about what they'd done in Ohio. This was probably 2012. And he said, we closed down all these schools. Those charter schools our schools were just not working in Dayton. So we closed them all down, and the kids were crying and the parents were really upset, but they had to go find somewhere else for their kids to be. And he said, and then in the next breath, practically, he said, but now we are focused on the 3 C's: Columbus, Cincinnati, and Cleveland. And we're already messaging in Cincinnati. Do you know those parents think their schools are good and they are happy with them? But we are trying to do some polling and get them to understand that their schools suck.
Yeah, and that's, oh man.
And
We
so
still
then
have that
I
happening
was
here.
so shocked, and I was just this little parent sitting in that room. And I said, wait a minute, but you just got done talking about the trauma that your closing of schools in Dayton had caused. And he got defensive. And he's like, well, at least we found other places for those kids to go or whatever. Lots of charters just close up shop and leave. But it's just this promise and this churn. And no teachers can be, there are no teachers in Indiana in a charter school that are unionized. So the teachers.
I wasn't allowed to be on a union when I taught at a Catholic school.
Well, not at a private school for sure. But even these charters that are not,
interesting.
Charter schools are not unionized. Those teachers do not have the same voice. And if they even start to talk about it, they're at-will employees and can be fired right away. There are some whistleblowers I've heard about that just get fired. And charter schools have ways of being like, and I'm not trashing. There are some really great charter schools, but when you have, well, I'll go back to what I was going to say, which is basically like there's discipline policies that are very extreme. And so they really can push out the kids that they don't want.
Oh yeah.
You
have to act the way they're telling you.
Untucked or whatever it is. And then those kids are having that whole disruption in their school and in their education. And they have a lot of studies showing that that's like a school to prison pipeline, is those extreme discipline policies where those kids get disrupted and then they're having behavior problems and they're trying to go back to the school. And part of this count date is like every like October and again this spring, there's a count date and you get your funding per pupil from the state. So when you get the count date, a lot of superintendents will tell you a whole bunch of kids from charter and voucher schools will come flying into the public school after count date. Without the funding, because it does not follow the child back.
So they'll accept everybody to get more money at the beginning, and then they'll have a hard academic or discipline policy, and then they'll kick a bunch of those kids out if they can't be perfect, and they get to keep that money.
If they are finding like the kid is not a good fit, that's a word.
They get to set the rules for that.
They just make sure they get that count date first, and then those kids go back. Now
I've heard about that. It's sad.
It's just this churn and this destabilization because we have so much funding going to these schools that get to choose these choice schools, or can cap how many kids come in, and then don't necessarily have the transportation. I mean, charter schools were sold to us that they were going to be cheaper, like to do. Like public schools are full of bureaucracy and red tape, and we need to. I mean, the origin of charter schools was actually like teacher union endorsed, Albert Shanker. It was supposed to be innovation.
I remember how great they sounded. I remember hearing about it.
It was supposed to be a way where you could innovate over here, and then this magic sauce would be able to come back. You were under the purview of a school board. So you were going to do this innovation, and then it would come back, and we would learn, and we would do better by all kids. But now it's become this private sort of entrepreneurial project
to make a few people make a ton of money.
Yeah, where you have like a brand, KIP or whatever it is, and those can be, there are no for-profit charter schools in Indiana. My home state has tons of for-profit charter schools. It's illegal to be a for-profit charter school, but nonprofit organizations that push school choice can still be making money.
Oh yeah, they're making money. That's the whole thing. We're not getting. People are profiting off of our children's not as good education, and they're doing it as much as they can. And with the whole guise of school choice is better. I remember hearing about charter schools, like you could send your kid to a math one if they love math, or a music one if they love music, or an art one. And I'm like, where are those? Like,
I think what we need to, this is so my oldest to my youngest are 10 years apart. And I have seen that trajectory also change as a parent. And I think that there's been a lot of pressure on parents in this day and age now to be consumers in their child's education. It's been a very successful sell that instead of looking at public education as the ultimate group project that we all have to make sure that we pass with flying colors, because the future for our kids, the future for our state, the future for our country, the future for democracy depends on whether or not we successfully create this common system, this public education system, where kids will learn what they need to thrive, and they'll learn what they need to learn in order to be really great contributing members to society. Like that whole democratic ideal is out the door, and it's become very business oriented. And we have to sort of bring that back in the way we frame this and think about it, because if it becomes about my child and my choice, and listen, I've heard everybody across the political spectrum frame it this way because it's become this way. I'm a consumer. This teacher kind of sucked this year, so I'm going to go out and look for another school to put my kid, right? And instead of like, your kid learns from all kinds of things. And if this teacher is really so bad, then it's to you to talk to the teacher. If that teacher can't correct it, it's up to you to talk to that principal. It's up to you to go up there, because when you lean in and make sure that these people are doing right by our kids, you're doing it for everybody. When you are going off onto somebody's entrepreneurial project, all of your social capital and your real capital is going out there with you. And so where you could be raising money in PTA for all kids and creating experiences and leaning in and making it a better system for all kids, you're over there creating your own little whatever lifeboat, because you have to leave the sinking ship. It's not helping the kids back on the ship. And so it's not to say that I blame parents for choosing or for having choice. I think that we've always had choice. It's about who pays for it and what kind of standard, like quality, are we going to have for all kids? And is this not our social responsibility and not a consumer good?
Yeah, you're phrasing it so well and you're helping me. So I really appreciate you being on. I want to talk about two more things before we leave. I want to talk
Okay.
about why this is not a partisan issue and why every Hoosier, every person living in Indiana that cares about our community and our children as a whole, why we should all be working together on this, regardless of how you vote or don't vote. And then I also want to talk about how people can get involved and help your wonderful organization. So, I met so many fantastic Republicans. I ran for state house as a Democrat, but I'm a people person. I don't really associate as a D or an R. I'm more just, I care about people. Um, and I met so many great Republicans when I tried to help good people get elected to North Harrison School Board. And they would be considered Republican. They vote Republican on the primaries. And I know the people that were aware of what was going on didn't vote straight party ticket. I know that they picked people based on education. So, my friends, the Republicans, voted for Jennifer McCormick for governor because she ran to try to save public education. And that was fine. Like, this isn't sports. This isn't we don't pick a team and stay with them until we die. We need to vote for the less people, and we need to be looking at this in education. I am frustrated that it's become a more Democrat issue because it's affecting Republicans. In my community, it's mostly Republicans, and it's hurting them. And some of them are aware, and I want more of them to be aware. So, what do you say? Because your organization is nonpartisan, which I think is what it should be, because this is a nonpartisan issue. This is a help all Hoosier students. What is your take and advice on how it's become partisan, and what do we need to do to save our schools?
So I think that we should not, I think that we have to make sure that we really carefully look at the fact that this has been a bipartisan attack on public schools. Like, you have only to look at what, the mayor of Indianapolis is a charter authorizer. And a
I
lot
just
of
found that
charter
out like a
schools,
month ago. I was
yeah, a
horrified.
lot of charter schools are organized or authorized by the mayor. A lot of the funding for school choice has come from like Michael Bloomberg in in New York. I mean, there was a ton of test-driven accountability and pro-charter school work under President Obama. And so, and Cory Booker used to be a huge charter and voucher proponent.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And yes, it was very interesting to see Betsy DeVos when she got on the national stage, and suddenly this topic that we've been trying to scream about from the mountaintops in every state, particularly ours, where we were in the crosshairs of a real struggle, it suddenly became nationally. People were suddenly like, whoa, we love our public schools. And I have to say, it was heartening to see. It was like massive movement of people calling, trying to stop her from becoming our Secretary of Education. A lot of water has been under the bridge since then, but it did shine a light on the Democrats for Education Reform that exist in Indianapolis, that exist across the country. And so it is also important to look at the fact that Nicole Hannah-Jones, who writes for the New York Times and did the 1619 Project, but she did a lot of public education articles. Like I think one is called A School for My Daughter, or The Problem We All Live With is a podcast that was amazing several years ago. And it's about segregation in schools. And this school choice is really resegregating us a lot. Yeah. But a lot more by income almost than
that's what I was going to say. Income is what I noticed.
And so the fact of the matter is that as this has been, she had said, first of all, if the public school is not good enough for your child, then whose child is it good enough for? And the other thing she said is, if we had fulfilled the promise of public education, if we had not allowed so much systemic racism to stay entrenched in our public schools, then they wouldn't have been so ripe for the picking to have the McCharter McMuffin come in and give them another promise of something. And so it's a dual action of holding our elected officials accountable and ensuring that our public schools locally are supported and are doing right by all kids, at the same time that we are saying that this option that you're offering in public funding going into private hands that do not have the same accountability or transparency, or even the same kids, is a waste of taxpayer dollars if we don't have unlimited taxpayer dollars. And at some point you have to reel it in. So I think that sometimes people want to say, because of the way the votes come down at the state level with state legislation, that it's a Republican versus Democrat issue. But in fact, we know that it is not. And you have only to talk to our friends in Indianapolis or in
I was going to say that
other places.
So I'm friends with Jesse Brown, just new friends with him on the city council. And I just recently became aware that even though it's a majority of Democrats, they are not sticking up for public education like they should. And then the mayor of Indianapolis is not sticking up for public education. So we cannot act like one side is right and one side is wrong. And we have people in power collectively letting this happen on both political parties. And it's going to take us, we the people that care about children and we want all of our children to have quality education, to stand up and say no. And that's part of the reason I started Project Next. It's not it's not partisan. We don't pick, we just call out the bad and we shine a light on the good, regardless of who, what letters next to your name.
So, I always want to say, like, this is not to say it's not a political fight. Obviously, this is a political fight, but politics are about your relationship to power. And our schools are in a major power struggle. There's a supermajority at the state house that does not have to listen to the people who are not in the supermajority. And they're extremists. Right. And we have had legislators, like right now, ICP is very grateful that they came out in the Senate with a budget that doesn't include universal vouchers. Senator Mishler said we're not going to add it. Now I don't know what happened because this is real time and I'm
I don't either.
A human that can't be sitting there watching every
me too.
But I have my legislative team of people, and we have our lobbyists at the state house who are keeping track of that. But that was a happy surprise that he's like, no, we're not going to fund virtual charter schools at 100%, which is what the House was asking for. In fact, we want to cut it back down to 70% because right now they get 80, I think. And And they were like, we don't have the funding to give wealthy people money for their tuition.
For their private
So,
schools.
for their private schools. So the point of that is that like we need to say thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We need to lean in and be like, and I'm not saying that's not really celebrating crumbs. What that is like trying to find the places where we see movement happening in the direction that we want. Like you see that is going to come at a cost to these kids, the most vulnerable kids in the public schools, to pay for wealthy people's tuition who can already afford to go to the private school. Is that a priority? Where are the priorities going to land? Because that money behind the legislators that we were talking about, that school choice money, schools choose, is pretty powerful. And so we as the constituents need to say, thank you. And
Yes.
if you can get us up to 3%, or if you could put some guardrails on that funding, thank you. And then for the other ones, no, thank you. And that is not going to work, that you want to just give, everybody gets a car.
So we shouldn't just blindly assume if they have a D by their name, they're for public, and an R by their name, they're against public, because that's not always true. And then we should also work with these people, even the people that seem to be against us. We should always be talking to them, working with them, compromising, and thanking them when they do small things that are better for public education.
I mean, that's how we feel about it, is like, honestly, if you see that is graft and you're not willing to put 100% to, 8 per pupil amount behind a virtual charter school that was like counting kids that were dead or out of state as their enrollment, then yes, hello. And why are you closing down, sticking in a bill, closing down a public school system, and then trying to put more money and more control over our money, like the public tax dollars, the property tax dollars rather, to charter schools, if 1 in 3 of them are closing down?
Right. Yeah, just simply call out the facts. Let's make this better.
Right.
I honestly think a lot of people that are voting the bad things don't understand how they're bad. And if they just listened and learned, and we gave them simple solutions, because what their job is hard and these bills are long and confusing, we can really help impact powerful positive change. And I think that's part of what you do at your organization. And I'm just so beyond thankful for you and all of the people that have been doing this work for so many years. My heart goes out to you. Thank you. I have 3 children in public education. I have so many parents and students that I love, that I want to get quality education to. And the fact that you're fighting for them, it motivates me to keep doing what I'm doing, because I'm not making money right now. I'd like to eventually make money with Project Next, but I'm not right now. My main concern is saving public education in Indiana.
And that's what we need to do. Like, we need to be, we are a volunteer run organization, nonpartisan, and it's taxing on us, and it's privilegey. I have the privilege as a mom that was at home to have been the president, to be able to do that. And so we have to figure out how we can broaden our networks and get people to lean in and to fight for this together, because this is, my kids are graduated, right? And now they're going after higher ed, but my kids are graduated and they had an amazing education. But it isn't about my kids. And that's the thing. It's about everybody's kids. The kids that we have in school right now, if those kids don't grow up to be able to contribute to society, they will be a drain on society.
And that will cost taxpayers more money. That will cost us more money in the long run.
Like, we don't even need a cost benefit analysis to say that hungry children should be fed. We don't need a cost benefit analysis to tell us that children need to be educated. That is something that
That we
didn't
should love them, that
exist.
the
This is
teachers should love them and see
right,
them in person and care for them, and that we
right.
should help with social skills in the classroom so that they get along, like these things that are so essential that they get at public school when they're around different types of kids,
Well, that's
different
exactly right.
needs.
Like,
You
those
need
things,
diversity, you
you
know?
do need those things, and that's another problem with creating, excuse me, like, little bubbles of
Mhm.
school, whether it's through this privatization, because ultimately, as I said, the group project is that our kids are learning the skills to be in a multicultural, pluralistic society and democracy if they're going to school with people who are different than they are. We are so polarized right now. And that is another reason for having public education, is because you're going to school with people who are different than you are, and you can learn that there is no boogeyman, that they love their children too, and that we may see things differently, have different beliefs, but we can figure out where that common ground is. And that is what will build this country up, is what is the common good, and how
You're
all,
basically just selling why I started Project Next.
yeah,
It's to stop the polarization. It's to stop that both sides are evil and we should fear the other side when that is so clearly not true. And you said it so well. Yes, we should not be scared of things that are different. And that's one of the things they sell with these charter private religious schools: fear differences. We better keep our kids closed off and only around other kids like each other, and that fear is so misguided, and it hurts us because then the kids learn to be scared of differences. And I just am like, I had an autistic child that, or actually she's in her 20s, come to my son's birthday party on Saturday. And my 6-year-olds had never met them. And I said, this girl, she's autistic and she might do this and this, and we're just going to love her. And whatever she needs, we're just going to give her. And I thought she might get upset. She loved the party. She loved my 6-year-old's toys. It was a delight. She had a wonderful time. And what a joy for my 6-year-olds to get to be around a 20-year-old with, severe autism. We need to stop fearing differences, and we need to stop selling it as this beautiful thing, because it's not.
right. And yeah, no,
How
it's
can
definitely,
we help you? So, like, if you're listening to this and this is new for you and you care about your kids' public schools, you can just simply start going to the school board meetings. That will help tremendously. And then you can kind of like put on social media or whatever what's going on, because a lot of people don't have time to attend those meetings. That's one thing. But
yeah,
if you're listening and you want to help this amazing coalition, you're called Indiana
Indiana
Coalition
College,
for Public Education.
yeah.
This is a great organization. If you want to help, what can they do to help you all?
So we would love for you to join us. We have membership, but it could be just donation or whatever you can afford. I mean, this is the only way that we get funding, is through the generosity of people who join us. If you do join us, you get on our mailing list. We'll have once a month newsletters that come out that give you action steps or ways to be involved, or information. But there's also a volunteer sheet that's on our website, like to tell us what you might be interested in. Maybe you want to track legislation with us. Maybe you would like to present this information, or have one of us come to one of the board members, or come to your meeting. I've
Oh, that'd be
been
nice.
up to speak at a community center up in Muncie. League of Women Voters has had us over to talk about legislation and the issues. I spoke with a parent group in Avon a couple months ago. We are happy to speak, and we are happy to get involvement. If you have ideas, this is the whole thing. Instead of saying, "Hey, how come your thing is not up to date?" Lean in and help us,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Our
Yeah.
volunteers, and we are doing the best we can with what we have. We would love to have more people involved, because we need to be a network that not only is sending out information and messaging so that we could all be on point, but we need messaging back. What is the issue? Like, we do try to connect people with resources. We do try to help people understand what's happening and get you connected with someone.
There, this is great. There's some real benefits of working with you all. I've learned so much from this hour conversation. You've been tracking this for so long. You see the issues and can teach it to people in a
Right.
way that can help us, because I'm new to this. I've just been involved for a few years. to keep going and to get the message out. So I really appreciate that you all have been around for so long and you've been fighting this and you see what works and what doesn't work so you can teach it to us.
Yeah.
So I'm just
Yeah.
so thankful.
Thank you so much. And I'm really thankful to always have this conversation. If you go on our website, you can see things right on the landing page, but you can also look at our blog and read over things that have happened before. One of our founders is Vic Smith, and he likes to write Vic State House notes. When I first got involved, he was at the State House writing copious notes about what was happening at the legislature. But we have all kinds of different things that are on our blog, and trying to gather information and try to find it in digestible ways so that people can understand. So
just put that Indiana Coalition for Public Education into your search engine and their website will pop up. That's how I found their website. And then you can sign up, you can become a member, you can help out. I'm sure that they would very quickly just welcome you in and find out what you want to do to help. I know social media is always changing and growing. I think if they had people communicating the mission of Indiana Coalition for Public Education on different social media sites and finding more people, because there are a lot of Hoosiers
right.
concerned about this. I think that would help. We all need to work together regardless of political party. We need to stop fighting and we need to protect our children. We just have to
Exactly.
protect our children. So
Exactly.
I really appreciate the nonpartisanship of your organization.
It's essential.
It's so
I mean,
important.
it's essential. This should not, there was a Republican governor before I ever got to Indiana that was Governor Orr, who had famous education policy that was about paying teachers more and having smaller class sizes. Like, it has not always been that we would look at an R and assume that they're looking to tear down this pillar of democracy and of our country. And so it's really about extremism, and we need to find a way to come back to the idea that this is for everyone. In a lot of those rural areas that you were talking about, the public school is the number one employer. If they close down those public schools, those are a lot of jobs lost, and that is the end of the heart beating in their community.
And like sports, we have so many sports, drama, music programs that public education provide that those charter schools do not. My son loves marching band. He plays tenors. It's his favorite thing in life is playing tenors.
Mine was
And
a marching band kid too.
and we don't have that in a charter school, in a private school, in a religious school. I would have to pay a bunch of money and drive really far away to like Louisville or something to find him someplace where he could play tenors with other kids. I would much rather let him do it for North Harrison, and it's, a few minutes away from my house. So people don't realize when you're attacking public schools, you're attacking the football games, the basketball games that people like to attend, those community events, the drama, the choir concerts. They don't realize that.
And when you were saying about going to your school board, we need to be loving critics of our public
Yes,
schools.
you're right. That's a good point.
We are not in there to breathe down the necks of people who are
There's just so much
sacrificing
yelling
a
and fighting.
lot of time. I was a school board member for 8 years here, and it was a pretty brutal position to be in. So we need to give grace to people that are trying to lead. We need to model for our kids that we're about kindness and finding common ground.
That's such a good point. I work with and am friends with quite a few of the Republican Palmyra Town Council members and the people that work for the town, and they get yelled at so much. And then you wonder why nobody wants to run for Palmyra Town Council.
Exactly.
It's like, well, look how you treat them.
That's
We
exactly
need to be kind, and then listen to them, and they'll listen to you, but don't yell at them, and don't get online and just trash talk them. Have a conversation with them first. We're humans. We're all human beings, and that stuff hurts. Sometimes I get negative stuff about me since I'm trying to be locally known, and it hurts. I mean, I get over it, but mean comments hurt, and I think most people get hurt by them. So just realize we're all human.
Yeah, it hurts people, but it's also just ineffective. If you really want change,
it actually makes the worst thing. It makes you not.
It
the
makes
person
people
doesn't want to
get
help you.
entrenched. It is not how change happens. Right?
Yeah, if you're yelling at somebody, why are they going to want to help you?
Right.
Yeah. Okay, you gave so many good tips. I learned a ton, and I'm
Thank
always
you,
thinking
Sarah.
I know
Grateful to
stuff.
be on here. Yeah, I'm really grateful.
You are very welcome to come on again. If there's
Yep.
some like group, if there's some big thing you all are doing, some event that I could help you promote, or some big issue that you want to get out, you have my cell number. Please text or call me. And
Okay.
big love to everybody at your organization.
Thank you very
Please
much.
tell
We hope that
them.
we can get more people to get involved.
Please join them.
Yep.
Yeah, share this episode everywhere. I will share it, and hopefully we can get you all some more volunteers and some more help, because so many of us care about our children in our schools, and we can make things better when we work together.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for joining. Please share. I'm going to have Josh Lowry on the show next week. He's a big public school advocate. So we'll talk more about like the laws going on in Indiana next week, and or it might be in 2 weeks. I can't remember. I think it's next week. And just stay tuned. I'll be putting up more info about this. I'm very thankful for all these quality guests. Thanks for being such an amazing guest and teaching us so much. And have a wonderful rest of your week. Tomorrow is Jackson Franklin running for Congress tomorrow at lunchtime. And then after that is a Tim Peck, who's running for Congress. His dad is a Vietnam veteran, and he's going to talk to my new friend Brian Zimmerman, who's a Special Forces veteran. They're going to have a talk about their experiences in different wars. And Brian Zimmerman is a Republican, and Alfred Peck is a Democrat, and they are friends and care about each other. What a shock!
Mm.
We need more of that, not less. So that'll be tomorrow. Two great shows tomorrow, and have a fantastic day. Bye,
Thank
everybody. Thanks
you.
for sharing. Bye.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Cathy.